This is Community Radio Networks. On this lovely Friday morning, it is the 5th of April. And we have all the information here getting you ready to take on the day. Right here on Community Radio Networks, we'll start with the world news. This is Community Radio Networks, the world news, read by Shabnam Madgil. President Biden told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the overall humanitarian situation in Gaza is unacceptable and warned Israel to take steps to address the crisis or face consequences, a stark statement from Israel's staunchest ally. The 30-minute conversation yesterday was the two leaders' first phone call since an Israeli strike killed 7 aid workers from the World Central Kitchen in Gaza. The killings have set off a furor inside the White House, and President Biden has been described as reaching a new level of frustration with Israel's campaign. He emphasized that the strikes on humanitarian workers and the overall humanitarian situation are unacceptable. He also said Israel needed to announce and implement a series of specific, concrete and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering and the safety of aid workers. In the phone call, Netanyahu admitted to his American counterpart that the Israel Defense Forces were to blame for the deaths of the 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers this week and assured President Biden that the Israeli government planned to announce measures to prevent such a mistake from happening again. The White House has quickly welcomed Israel's announcement that it would allow temporary aid deliveries into famine-threatened northern Gaza, hours after the United States warned of a sharp shift of its policy over Israel's offensive against Hamas. The White House said the move came at the president's request and said it must now be fully and rapidly implemented. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that Washington wanted to see results showing more aid was reaching Gazans after Israel announced it would open routes into the territory. Israel committed to opening additional aid routes to allow for increased assistance to flow into Gaza after this call, with President Biden warning of a potential shift in U.S. policy after the strike this week that killed 7 World Central Kitchen aid workers. The Israeli military has fired 2 officers and said that a probe into the strikes that killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers found serious errors and violations of protocol that led its forces to repeatedly hit the convoy. It says its forces believe was carrying Hamas gunmen and not the aid team members. There have been mounting calls for an independent probe into the incident, and the charity said that the IDF cannot credibly investigate its own failure in Gaza. The U.S. issued the strongest public rebuke towards Israel since it launched an invasion of Gaza, seeking for the first time to leverage U.S. aid to influence Israeli military behavior. And during this call, President Biden underscored that an immediate ceasefire is essential to stabilize and improve the humanitarian situation and protect innocent civilians. President Biden issued this ultimatum to Israel that U.S. support in the Gaza war depends on immediate steps to protect civilians and aid workers. And he spoke 3 days after a team from celebrity chef Jose Andra's World Central Kitchen aid group were killed in an Israeli drone strike in northern Gaza. More than half of Gaza's children, 620,000, unable to attend school due to the destruction wrought by 6 months of conflict on the enclave's education system. 8 out of every 10 schools in Gaza are damaged or destroyed, with about 10% of the facilities totally decimated. And the U.S. looking into a media report that the Israeli military has been using artificial intelligence to help identify bombing targets in Gaza. And it is reported by White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby, who said the U.S. had not verified the content of the media report published. And this opens new tabs citing Israeli intelligence officials involved in the reported program known as Calender. GPS is being blocked across swaths of Israel in order to disrupt missiles and drones as tensions rise with Iran. Iran has vowed to respond after a strike on its consulate building in Syria on Monday, which Israel is widely believed to be behind, killed 13 people, including a senior general. And Israeli authorities seem to believe an Iranian response is imminent and could come as soon as today, which is Quds Day or Jerusalem Day, the last Friday in the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. Israel has escalated its security alert to the highest level for its embassies worldwide, initiating an urgent evacuation of consulates in anticipation of potential retaliatory attacks from Iran or its proxies. The precautionary measures include relocating some Israeli diplomatic representatives to safer locations and advising against the organization of public events. The White House has expressed its deep concerns regarding this escalating tensions between Israel and Iran following the deadly airstrike on Iran's embassy in Syria. President Biden plans today to visit the site of the Baltimore bridge that collapsed after a colossal cargo ship plowed into it last week, killing 6 people and severing a major shipping and transportation artery. During his visit to the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, Mr. Biden will take an aerial tour, receive briefings on the response efforts, and meet with the families of construction workers who were plunged into the Patapsco River along with the structure. He's set to encounter a more than mile-long tangle of concrete and steel that has snarled traffic, devastated blue-collar communities, and disrupted operations at one of America's biggest ports, threatening chaos that could ripple across supply chains. More than 400 lawmakers, activists, civil rights leaders, musicians, and actors have written a joint letter to President Biden, calling on him to support a list of congressional bills on racial equity and reparative justice through executive actions and orders. And a New York judge has denied Donald Trump's bid to delay his April 15 trial on charges stemming from hush money paid to a porn star until the U.S. Supreme Court reviews claim to presidential immunity in a separate criminal case. The court is scheduled to hear the former president's arguments that he is immune from federal prosecution for trying to overturn his 2020 election defeat to Democratic President Biden on the 25th of this month. More than 400,000 homes and businesses in Maine and New Hampshire without power early this morning as a late-season nor'easter brought heavy snow and strong winds to parts of the northeast. The widespread outages leave many without indoor heating as the storm blankets the region with snow, toppling trees and power lines and making travel difficult. Concern is growing among health officials over the latest bird flu outbreak after a person in Texas caught the virus from an infected dairy cow in the first known instance of a mammal passing the disease to a human. Even scientists who have tracked avian influenza for years are confused by its recent spread in dairy cattle populations. It is the H5N1 virus detected in dairy cows in Texas and Kansas, and also later confirmed in cows in Idaho, Michigan, and New Mexico. Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice says he takes full responsibility for his part in a crash on Central Expressway in Dallas last Saturday. The crash involved 6 vehicles and injured 4. A Corvette and a Lamborghini were seen racing on Highway 75 when one lost control and started this chain reaction crash. Dallas police said the occupants of the 2 aforementioned vehicles left the scene without leaving any information. Following the deaths of rescue workers in a Russian attack in Kharkiv, Ukrainian President Zelensky has criticized the West's hesitation in providing military aid to the country as completely unacceptable. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has announced a significant shift in NATO's military strategy, emphasizing the deployment of new advanced weaponry and enhanced defense systems. And this pivot aims to counteract evolving global threats and assert NATO's military dominance on the world stage. During a meeting yesterday which coincided with the 75th anniversary of NATO, a celebration somewhat dimmed by the ongoing conflict at its borders, member countries resolved to delve into their military stockpiles for additional air defense systems. Latvia is to provide Ukraine with further military aid for its defense against Russia, and Finland will extend the closure of its border crossing points with Russia beyond the current April 14th deadline until further notice due to a high risk of organized migration orchestrated by Moscow, according to the Finnish government in Helsinki. Russia is running a disinformation campaign to undermine the Paris Olympics. This according to French President Emmanuel Macron. French President has said he had no doubt Russia would malevolently target the Paris Olympics this summer. His comments delivered at an event in Paris for the inauguration of the new Olympic Aquatic Center represent his most explicit acknowledgement to date of foreign threats to the security or smooth running of the Games, taking place amid a complex global backdrop with Russia's war in Ukraine and Israel's military campaign in Gaza complicating efforts to safeguard the Olympics. Rafael Nadal withdrew from the upcoming Monte Carlo Masters, where the 22-time Grand Slam winner was expected to make his ATP Tour comeback, saying his body is not yet ready for competition. The 37-year-old Spaniard, who has said he expects to retire after this year's season, returned to competition in Brisbane in January after almost a year sidelined with a hip flexor injury, but has not played an ATP event since. The season-ending WTA Finals will be held in Saudi Arabia's capital of Riyadh from 2024 to 2026. This according to the women's tennis body, ending months of speculation and marking the Gulf country's latest foray into the sport. Riyadh will host the season finale, which features the top 8 singles players and double teams from the 2nd to the 9th of November and replaces last year's host Cancun, Mexico. Somalia has expelled the Ethiopian ambassador from the country and ordered the closure of 2 consulates, accusing Ethiopia of infringing on Somalia's sovereignty and internal affairs. Somalia also recalled its ambassador from Ethiopia's capital of Addis Ababa for comprehensive consultations. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the World News on Community Radio Networks. Rescuers in Taiwan face the threat of further landslides and rockfalls in their search here today for a dozen people still missing from this week's earthquake, as the death toll has risen to 12 and some of the stranded were brought to safety. Searchers discovered 2 more bodies after the quake of magnitude 7.2 struck the sparsely populated, largely rural eastern county of Hualien, stranding hundreds in a national park as boulders barreled down mountains, cutting off roads. As some 50 aftershocks have rattled the area, and some felt as far away as Taipei. Myanmar's main pro-democracy resistance group said its armed wing launched drone attacks on the airport and a military headquarters in the capital of Naypyidaw, but the country's ruling military said it destroyed or seized more than a dozen drones used in those attacks. The opposition National Unity Government's Defense Ministry said in a statement that special units of the People's Defense Force used drones to attack the targets simultaneously. The Congress Party today announced its manifesto for the upcoming Lok Sabha elections at the All India Congress Committee headquarters in Delhi. And the manifesto, released by party chief Mallikarjun Kharge alongside former Presidents Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, focused on the party's commitment to justice through its 5 pillars. Delhi Minister and Aam Aadmi Party Saurabh Bhardwaj said this morning that Sunita Kejriwal, the wife of Arvind Kejriwal, is the best person to keep the party together in the current circumstances. The presence of the jail chief minister's wife was a positive effect on the cadre of the party, he said. The Supreme Court in New Delhi today stayed the Allahabad High Court's order striking down the UP board of the Madrasa Education Act. The top court said the High Court's judgment would affect the 17 lakh students, and it is of the view that the direction of relocation of students to other schools was not warranted. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif today called upon the international community to pressure Israel to halt its oppression of Palestinians. In his message on the International Al-Quds Day, observed on this last Friday of Ramzan today to express solidarity with the people of Palestine struggling against Israeli occupation, the Premier strongly denounced Israeli atrocities in Gaza. The Pakistan Ulema Council has declared today as Peace for Palestine Day to create awareness about the Palestine issue and advocate for its peaceful resolution. Taliban authorities urge Pakistan not to make a unilateral decision on repatriating Afghan migrants, saying they shouldn't be harassed after reports that Islamabad would renew an eviction campaign. Pakistan denied the perception that the policy on expulsion of foreigners illegally residing in Pakistan was Afghan specific. Since the announcement of the policy last year, amidst heightened TTP violence that further frayed the ties between Islamabad and Kabul, nearly 527,000 Afghans have returned to Afghanistan. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, General Sahir Shamshad Mirza, and President Asif Ali Zardari today expressed the resolve to stamp out the scourge of terrorism from the country. The development came as General Mirza met President Zardari this morning at the presidency. And a report has found a surge in the technology-facilitated gender-based violence in Pakistan last year, with nearly 2,500 cases reported in the year, with significant rise of such complaints by women and marginalized groups. And the year saw another alarming trend, that is the use of generative AI content for violence against women in the public sphere near the general elections. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the world news for you today. We do have your financial news, and I think the labor report should have come out by now. Let's get all that to you in just a minute. Stay with me right here on the airwaves of Community Radio Networks. Financial news for this Friday, the 4th of April, and we'll start with the foreign currency exchange rates. We have the Indian rupee at 83.37, Pakistani rupee 277.89, Bangladeshi taka at 109.89, the Sri Lankan rupee at 299.11, Nepalese rupee 133.45, the British pound 0.79, the euro 0.93, the Canadian dollar 1.36, the Australian dollar 1.52, Mexican peso 16.52, Chinese yuan 7.23, Japanese yen 151.71. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida warned against the yen slide, pledging to act appropriately against excessive moves without excluding any options, in a continuation of the nation's verbal defense against sharp moves in the yen. And we do have the Russian ruble at 92.23, Thai baht 36.77, Turkish lira 31.96. Stocks have fallen ahead of today's jobs report as a rally in oil amid geopolitical tensions triggered a flight to the safest corners of the market. Treasuries climbed and the dollar ended near sessions highs. The S&P 500 dropped 1.2%, erasing gains. And Brent crude has topped $90 a barrel. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at a security cabinet meeting, his country will operate against Iran and its proxies and will hurt those who seek to harm it. The March jobs report is just out. 303,000 jobs were added in the month during last month. And European stocks have slumped the most in almost 2 months, tracking a broad market trend as oil prices held the near 5-month highs and investors braced for this key reading on the U.S. labor market that has just come out. Oil held on to yesterday's large jump as escalating tensions in the Middle East catapulted prices past the $90 barrel threshold. Global benchmark Brent earlier pierced $91 a barrel before trading little change, and the focus has shifted to a dramatic repricing of geopolitical risk. Spot gold, a much more global and liquid market, hit record highs on 5 previous trading sessions as investors jumped in looking for exposure to the metal used to preserve wealth. And gold's record high at 2,305.04 an ounce hit yesterday's amounts to a gain of 12% since the start of the year. Bob Iger's on a hot streak. A week after settling a win-win situation with the state of Florida, he prevailed in a bruising proxy fight. This marks 2 significant victories and extinguishes major distractions that have needled Disney over the past year. But now that he's cleared a path and quieted outside critics badgering the company, he's still left with all the problems at home. Disney's moment of uncertainty extends to Iger himself and to the CEO role. Since tumbling in multi-year lows in October, Disney shares have climbed close to 50%. In that time, Iger and his management team have advanced a series of ambitious initiatives to re-energize the company, including a movie studio shakeup and a partnership with Epic Games and maker of Fortnite. Johnson & Johnson has this morning agreed to buy Shockwave Medical for $12.5 billion in a deal that would help broaden its portfolio of medical devices used in treating heart disease. And this transaction, which is Johnson & Johnson's biggest since its $16.6 billion acquisition of heart pump maker Abiomed in 2022, would give it access to a medical device that uses shockwaves to break down calcified plaque in heart vessels, similar to how kidney stones are treated. And Johnson & Johnson offered $335 per share in cash, or a 17% premium to the stock's closing price in late March. 99-cents only stores will close all 371 of its stores and wind down its business operations after more than 4 decades. This was announced there in California, Arizona, Nevada, and Texas. 99-cents only stores have 14,000 employees. President Biden's advisors have called major Baltimore employers, including Amazon.com Inc. and Home Depot Inc., to encourage them to retain jobs despite the bridge collapse that shut the city's port. Just walk out. That technology pioneered by Amazon seemed like it would change the future of grocery shopping. This week, Amazon said it is going to be discontinued. The information revealed that Amazon plans to open a new batch of grocery stores after an 18-month pause. Along with the expansion, it plans to discontinue the Just Walk Out technology. To use this technology, the customers were required to use their payment method to enter a store. It then allowed customers to simply shop and exit. That's right, they didn't even have to go through the self-checkout process. They were automatically charged based on camera footage of their shopping trip. And it was pretty interesting. I used it once in Los Angeles. Banks have now regained all deposits they lost following the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, but that doesn't solve many of the problems still faced by regional lenders. The amounts of deposits held by all U.S. banks hit $17.56 trillion during the week that ended the 20th of March, exceeding the pre-SVB levels for the first time since the California regional lender was seized on the 10th of March. Last year. While the traditional step after high school has been a college or 4-year university, Gen Z is looking to shake things up, picking skilled trades over pricey degrees. The trend is being observed by many, including TV personality and the king of getting your hands dirty, Mike Rowe, who became famous from his show Dirty Jobs. He spoke with News Nation about the recent flip to skilled trades over college, saying that many are looking into options that wouldn't leave them with decades worth of debt. And it's been 4 years since the United States elected a woman to the second highest office in the land, and the possibility of having a woman vice president could become an inevitability based on who former President Trump chooses as his running mate. However, even though more than half of the country is female, women are still underrepresented in American politics. According to the Center for American Women and Politics, a unit of the Eagleton Institute of Politics at Rutgers University, just 28.2% of the national congressional seats are held by women. That's a record high. In fact, this year marks record highs for women serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, state legislators, state executive offices, and as governors, with 12 women holding the title of a governor. And most women who are elected officials are also Democrats. And the states with the highest percentage of women in elected political positions, number one, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, Washington, Vermont, New Mexico, Maine, Rhode Island, Illinois, and Maryland. In addition to Vice President Kamala Harris, who's running again with President Biden, businesswoman Nicole Shanahan is running as an independent candidate for Robert F. Kennedy's running mate. Samsung Electronics Company aims to raise its investment in Texas to about $44 billion. South Korea's largest company will focus much of that new spending around the city of Taylor, where it's already building a semiconductor facility close to existing operations. Samsung now plans to build another chip-making plant and an advanced packaging hub. An Irving man has pleaded guilty today to submitting fraudulent insurance claims for COVID-19 testing, resulting in a more than $7 million loss to insurers. Federal prosecutors say that the 40-year-old Terrence Bernard of Irving was a contract lab technician. He went from office to office, and also he had access to patient records. We do have the SMU football team taking the field for their spring games at the Highland Park High School today, and the Mustangs will be wearing helmets that have been designed by a special young lady. At just 6 weeks old, Annabelle Spears of Dallas faced a life-threatening diagnosis, a rare liver disease. Swift action from her care team at the Children's Health placed her on the liver transplant list, and months later, the awaited call arrived, and there was a matching liver for Annabella, and today she thrives as a typical teenager. One of her joys is painting, and that played perfectly into the opportunity to submit a design for the SMU Mustangs helmet for the football team's spring game. At the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens, the Total Eclipse Weekend features NASA astronauts, astrophysicists, and authors who will educate teachers, students, and the community about the eclipse. More than 30 million people live within the path of totality of this solar eclipse coming up on Monday. Happens when the moon passes in front of the sun and blocks it completely. In Dallas, the partial eclipse begins at 12:23 p.m. with the total eclipse at 1:40 p.m., lasting 3 minutes and 52 seconds. This is only for Dallas. Leaders from the U.S. Air Force Reserve met at the Lockheed Martin plant in Fort Worth this week to sign the bulkhead of the first F-35 that will be delivered to the organization later this year. The Air Force Reserve is upgrading from the F-16 to the F-35 Lightning II. McDonald's will buy every one of its 225 franchise restaurants in Israel, just weeks after saying that the Israel-Hamas war was hurting its business. The fast food giant said it had struck an agreement with Israeli franchisor Alonial to buy the firm's McDonald's franchise restaurants in the entire country, and that's 225 of them. Shell has said this morning it expects significantly lower results from its LNG trading business in the first quarter of this year compared with the previous 3 months. And Asian stocks have tumbled today, and oil extended the previous day's surge on worries that Israel's war with Hamas could widen to a regional conflict with Iran as both sides ratcheted up tensions. And a group of Japanese firms have agreed to raise wages by 5.24% this year, the country's largest union group reporting this, the third announcement on this outcome of annual pay negotiations, compared with the second survey of 5.25 and the initial outcome of 5.28 last month. Still the biggest rise since 1991. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen chided China's government for unfair treatment of American and other foreign companies and called on Beijing to return to the pro-market reforms of the past as the start of a 4-day visit to the country. And Australia's wine industry has cheered news that China will drop anti-dumping tariffs, reopening its market to imports, but the tougher economic conditions of this year are unlikely to deliver the sparkling growth winemakers seek. For 2 decades, China has driven growth in the global wine industry as many among the hundreds of millions entering its middle class acquired a taste for wines from Australia, Chile, Italy, and France. The Reserve Bank of India today kept the repo rate unchanged for the 7th consecutive time at 6.5%. And Reserve Bank of India Governor Shaktikant Das said that the SDF and MSF stands at 6.25 and 6.75 respectively. Two-wheeler major Hero Motor Corporation has said it has received demand notice from the Income Tax Department for around 605 crore rupees, including interest for 6 assessment years. And Air India's ambitious revival program has entered its climb phase just over 2 years after being taken over by founder Tata Group, getting that nod for merging Vistara into AI and starting to use AI here is Air India, and for Vistara merging with Air India and starting to use the newly inducted Airbus A350s for long and ultra-long haul international routes are the next milestone for the Maharaja, according to a progress chart made by Tatas. The Enforcement Directorate has seized movable assets of Vinod Khute, the owner of VIPS Group, worth 24 crore rupees under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And Bhutan's investment arm and BitDeer Technologies Group are planning to ramp up their Bitcoin mining operation to help offset the revenue impact of an upcoming event known as the halving. The partnership between Druck Holding and Investments and Nasdaq-listed crypto mining firm BitDeer aims to invest in boosting Bhutan's mining capacity 6-fold through the introduction of cutting-edge hardware. An official of the International Monetary Fund has said that the IMF board will finalize the release of its last tranche to Pakistan by the end of the month. That is the $3 billion standby arrangement for Pakistan to support the country's economic stabilization program. In a rare development, the Federal Board of Revenue in Islamabad has notified an incentives-laden scheme offering privileges and facilities to top exporters and taxpayers, and banks in Karachi experiencing a surplus of dollars driven by exporters swiftly selling their earnings in anticipation of further depreciation of the U.S. currency. NEPRA imposed a fine of 50 million rupees each on 5 power distribution companies, including K Electric, for carrying out commercial-based excessive load shedding in violation of laws penalizing honest consumers. And the Pakistan Telecommunication Authority told the Peshawar High Court that it had blocked 1.07 million web links after finding their contents to be blasphemous or pornographic. Federal Minister for Privatization Abdul Aleem Khan has called PIA an attractive opportunity for local and international investors. As he chaired a meeting of the Privatization Commission Board, he hoped that Pakistani businesses would show their interest in acquiring the national airline. It is Engro Energy, a wholly owned subsidiary of Engro Corporation, that has entered into a share purchase agreement with Liberty Power Holding. Pakistani business tycoon Hussain Dawood's Engro Energy sold its coal mining and power generation business that has been a key source of cheap energy in the nation for the past 5 years, sold its thermal unit to Liberty Power Holding and a consortium of 3 partner companies for $125 million. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have in the financial news for you, but I do have a final segment of the program coming up in just a minute. Stay with us right here, Community Radio Networks. In this final segment of our program, first I would like to thank all the supporters of community radio networks who make this possible every day. Big thanks going out to Discount Power, and you can always get more information about them at discountpowertx.com. And I have very special thanks going out to Mr. Malik Jamal. Also, Houston EB5 and Mr. Pradeep Kumar there can help you with any of their projects, but you can get more details at HoustonEB5.com. Attorney Pallavi Aluwalia with your immigration or family law cases, and she is available at the Aluwalia Law offices, and you can check out more details at aluwalialaw.com. The Wyndham Hotel in Irving has the most beautiful banquet halls for your next event, and if you need more information, you can call 214-675-1754. Digital X-Force headed by Lalit Aluwalia, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is in South Lake. Also, attorney Kimberly Kinzer at kinzerlaw.com for all your immigration-related questions. My Kolachi restaurant in Plano, and then new location, the Ruchi Palace by My Kolachi in Carrollton. Also, Shri Vimal on 183 and MacArthur, and right there, the Vimal's venue. Also, big thanks going out to Eggholic at on MacArthur Boulevard, as well as Mystic Mandala and Flash Brush Productions. Huge thanks going out to all of them. And today, another very spectacular day ahead. After we get out of the 50s this morning and sunny and warm again this afternoon, today's highs will reach the mid-80s again. 74 is supposed to be the average high, but looks like we'll go beyond 80. And then we'll start tomorrow near 60. A bunch of wind, though, tomorrow is going to invade our area through the day, with afternoon highs again near 80 and a slight chance of a shower or storm tomorrow evening, but most will stay dry. And then Sunday looks mostly sunny, breezy and warm as the air dries out briefly. And again, the afternoon highs will top out near 80 degrees. That's as far as the weather in the Dallas-Fort Worth area is concerned. Now, tomorrow, Thrive Kids Foundation are having their Autism Spectrum Frontiers, advancing knowledge in diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of autism. It's happening at the Collin College Conference Center on Wade Boulevard in Frisco tomorrow, and in the morning from 8 till 1 p.m., healthcare professional conference will be held, and then the panel discussion for the community from 2 to 4. And that at the Collin College Conference Center. Thrive Kids Foundation bringing you Autism Spectrum Frontiers. The Success Door, the Pledge Campaign Foundation, is presenting Fly, First Love Yourself, showcasing Season 4. This is happening also tomorrow from 4 to 8 at the Dew Event Center in Louisville. And we do have TIPS, the Texas Indo-American Physician Society, bringing you their 5K or 10K, whichever one you prefer, a run or a walk, as coming up on Sunday, the day after tomorrow, to support the TIPS Charity Clinic. Is going to be at the Oak Point Preserve on Spring Creek Parkway in Plano at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you do need to register online at runsignup.com. Now, beginning this year, TIPS NEC, the Northeast chapter, it has inaugurated a mentorship program to help students of Indian and South Asian origin. And these medical students in the North Texas region and graduates of Indian medical schools who are looking for residency positions, fellowships, clinical and research observerships, and jobs can send an email to mentorship@tipsnec.org. Color Me Safe Foundation is a family crisis management organization serving the greater Dallas area, and they've launched 2 new educational initiatives. One is called Ask Auntie, and the other is Sathi Support Group. Through discussion on topics such as generational and cultural gaps, cultural identity, mental health, bullying, and many more, these programs seek to empower South Asian children and families with the tools and understanding to overcome these shared challenges in a very supportive and non-judgmental space. So for more information about how you can attend these, you can contact Impact or send an email, impact@colormesafefoundation.org or Gautami at colormesafefoundation.org. And of course, we've been talking a lot about the solar eclipse that's coming up on Monday. We have given you lots and lots of details about that. Now, the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce, in their Spirit of Innovation Technology competition, are having a business plan presentation. That's coming up next Friday. That's exactly a week from today. That's going to be the 12th of April from 9 to 1 at the Brookhaven College on Valley View Lane in Farmers Branch. You can get more information if you'd like to attend that at usicoc.org, U.S. India Chamber of Commerce, usicoc.org. That's on the 12th. And then on the 13th of April, Vibha's 18th annual kite flying festival at the Sound at Cypress Waters on Olympus Boulevard in Coppell. It's happening the following Saturday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, from 3 to 8. And part of that is also going to be Talent for a Reason, calling anyone who wants to dance, sing, do stand-up comedy, or show a unique skill, or do martial arts, or any talent that is welcome. Please join on the community stage at the Sound Amphitheater in Coppell. You can get more information at dallas.vibha.org. And then on Sunday, the 14th, from 4 to 7, Music That Feeds, a Hunger Mitau initiative, an evening of melody with a difference. And that is from 4 to 7 at UTD's Johnson Performance Hall on Sunday, the 14th. Now, April is celebrated as Diversity Month. Please join the Dallas Symphony Orchestra for a special pre-concert event celebrating the importance of diversity, inclusion, equity, and unity. And this diversity night featuring many of community partners, and one of them is the U.S.-India Chamber of Commerce, and they value the inclusion and recognize the power of an organizational culture that respects, honors, and embraces people of diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and abilities. Now, on the 19th of April, they are having this celebrating this diversity night from 6 to 7 at the Meyerson Symphony Center. It's a pre-concert event featuring performances, light snacks, and drinks. It's a pre-concert event which is absolutely free. But of course, if you want to see the concert, and the concert, by the way, is Troupe Vertigo, of course, then you have to get your tickets. Meyerson Symphony Center, 19th of April from 6 to 7. The Hyderabad Society of North Texas are having their Eid picnic on the 20th of this month, Saturday the 20th, from noon till 6 p.m. at the Travick Pavilion in Grapevine. And for more information, you can call Muhammad Hamid. His number is 469-544-4118. Pratham's annual gala is happening on Saturday, the 20th of April at the Omni Frisco Hotel. The entertainment is going to be by Vidya Vox, the YouTuber and singer, and the keynote speaker is Krish Dhanam, the author Krish Dhanam. And we are thrilled to invite you to the 2024 Pratham Dallas Fort Worth Gala, an extraordinary evening dedicated to empowering children and young people in India to transform their lives and communities. Saturday, the 20th of April at the Omni Frisco Hotel, and this year's gala theme is Changing Lives, Transforming Communities, and it will highlight the remarkable impact of Pratham's work in expanding access to quality learning opportunities. A few more dates I'd like for you to mark. Sunday, the 21st of April, for 1 hour, 6:30 to 7:30, Healing the World Through Peace. Every individual can contribute to healing the world with thoughts of peace and love. And these qualities are always within us. And when we realize them, we can naturally share them. World Meditation Hour, where we focus on sending thoughts of peace and healing for the whole world. This is being organized by the Brahma Kumaris. And for more details, you can go onto their website, which is bkrymeditation.com. US. That's Brahma Kumari's Raja Yoga. 360 Shows, Diamond Productions, and 24/7 Entertainment are presenting Neetu Chandra as Umrao Jan Ada, a musical play in the Broadway style based on the novel written by Mirza Hadi Ruswa. 26th and 27th of April, they'll be having 3 shows, and your tickets are available at Ticketmaster.com. And in the month of May, for the first time in American television history, PBS stations across the United States will show a new documentary film on Swami Vivekananda called America's First Guru, and that too a first by an Indian origin documentary filmmaker. And again, as we get close to it, we'll have more details coming up for you. Do remember that Badshah is coming into town on the 14th of June, and the Pagal tour is going to be at the Curtis Culwell Center. And then on the 16th of June, Shreya Ghoshal live in concert, also at the Curtis Culwell Center. That's your social calendar as it stands on this 5th day of April. And let me tell you some stories from the annals of history that happened on the 5th of April. Pocahontas, the daughter of the chief of the Powhatan Confederacy, marries English tobacco planter John Rolfe in Virginia, and the marriage ensured peace between the Jamestown settlers and the Powhatan tribe for several years. You all have heard the story of Pocahontas. Well, that wedding happened on the 5th of April in 1614. On the 5th of April in 1774, Benjamin Franklin writes an open letter to Great Britain's Prime Minister Frederick Lord North from the Smyrna Coffee House in London. It was published in the Public Advertiser, a British newspaper, about 10 days later, on the 15th of April. His tongue-in-cheek letter suggested that the British impose martial law upon the colonies and appoint a king's viceroy of all North America. Franklin satirically went on to suggest that such centralized power over Yankee Doodles, who had degenerated to such a degree from their British ancestors that one born in Britain is equal to 20 Americans, would allow the crown to collect its taxes and then sell their impoverished colonies and colonists to Spain. Now, Smyrna Coffee House on the St. James Street in London had been a meeting place of Whigs or political liberals since the 17th century. And for Benjamin Franklin to sign a letter drafted at Smyrna's, a friend of military government, was an obvious use of irony. And that was done on today's date in the year 1774. Of course, he found his own suggestions laughable, and it was the Prime Minister North who seemed to find such a scheme practicable and pursued it at the cost of many lives and eventually Britain's 13 colonies. George Washington exercises the first presidential veto of a congressional bill. On today's date, the 5th of April in 1792, when the bill introduced a new plan for dividing seats in the House of Representatives that would have increased the amount of seats for northern states. After consulting with his politically divided and contentious cabinet, George Washington, who came from the southern state of Virginia, ultimately decided that the plan was unconstitutional because in providing for additional representatives for some states, it would have introduced a number of representatives higher than that prescribed by the Constitution. He exercised his veto power only one other time during his 2 terms in office. In February of 1797, 5 years later, the former commanding general of the Continental Army vetoed an act that would have reduced the number of cavalry units in the army. Naturalist Charles Darwin sends his publishers the first 3 chapters of On the Origin of Species, which will become one of the most influential books ever published. Happened on today's date in the year 1859. Knowing the fates of scientists who had published radical theories and been ostracized or worse, Charles Darwin held off publishing his theory of natural selection for years. He secretly developed his theory during 2 decades of surreptitious research, following his return from a 5-year voyage to South America on the HMS Beagle as the ship's unpaid botanist. The privileged and well-connected son of a successful English doctor, he had been interested in botany and natural sciences since his boyhood. At Cambridge, he found professors and scientists with similar interests and with their help began participating in scientific voyages, including this one on the HMS Beagle. And in this trip, when he returned, he had developed this outstanding reputation as a field researcher and scientific writer based on his many papers and letters dispatched from South America and the Galapagos Islands, which were read at meetings of prominent scientific societies in London. On the Origin of Species, and the first 3 chapters of it were sent to his publisher by Charles Darwin on the 5th of April in 1859. And you'll do know that when he finally published, another scientist began publishing papers with similar ideas. And when the book appeared, it sold out immediately. By the year 1872, 6 editions had been published and laid the groundwork for modern botany, cellular biology, and genetics. Charles Darwin died in 1882. Writer Oscar Wilde is arrested after losing a libel case against the Marquess of Queensberry. He had been engaged in an affair with the Marquess's son, but when the outraged Marquess denounced him as a homosexual, he sued the man for libel. However, he lost his case when evidence strongly supported the Marquess's observations. Homosexuality then was classified as a crime in England at the time, and Oscar Wilde was arrested, found guilty, and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. He was a well-known author by this time, having produced several brilliant and popular plays, including The Importance of Being Earnest. Born and educated in Ireland, he came to England to attend Oxford, and when he graduated with honours, this popular society figure, known for his wit and flamboyant style, published his own book of poems in 1881 and spent a year lecturing on poetry in the United States. And you all do know his reviews, and he did edit Women's World, and in 1890 his only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray, was published serially, appearing in book form the following year. And he wrote his first play called The Duchess of Padua, and wrote 5 more before his arrest. Released from prison, fled to Paris, where his many loyal friends visited him, and started writing again, producing The Ballad of Reading Gaol, based on his experiences in prison. And he died of acute meningitis in the year 1900. But the year he was arrested after losing that libel case was 1895, on today's date, the 5th of April. And the climax of the most sensational spy trial in American history is reached on today's date in 1951, when a federal judge sentences Julius and Ethel Rosenberg to death for their roles in passing atomic secrets to the Soviets. And although the couple proclaimed their innocence, they were executed in June 1953, convicted of playing a central role in a spy ring that passed secret data concerning the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union during and immediately after World War II, and their part in the espionage came to light when British physicist Klaus Fuchs was arrested in Great Britain in 1950. They and their attorneys continued to plead their innocence, arguing that they were victims of political hysteria. Humanitarian organizations in the U.S. and around the world pleaded for leniency, particularly since the Rosenbergs were the parents of 2 young children, and the pleas for special consideration were ignored, and they were executed in 1953. But they were sentenced to death on today's date in 1951. Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, the British leader who guided Great Britain and the Allies through the crisis of World War II, retires as Prime Minister of Great Britain. That happened on today's date in the year 1955. After a post-war Labour Party victory in 1945, he became leader of the opposition, and in 1951 was again elected Prime Minister. In 1953, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II and awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. After his retirement as Prime Minister, he remained in Parliament until 1964, the year before his death. But he retired as Prime Minister on the 5th of April in 1955. And as city officials in Boston are scrambling to prepare for an expected second straight night of unrest after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., soul artist and entertainer James Brown helps keep the peace by his sheer force of music and his personal charisma. Similar preparations were being made in cities across America, including in the nation's capital, where armed units of the regular army patrolled outside the White House and the U.S. Capitol following President Johnson's state of emergency declaration. But Boston would be nearly alone among America's major cities in remaining quiet and calm that turbulent Friday night, thanks in large part to Brown, and that was James Brown. But he calms Boston following Martin Luther King's assassination, and that was a day later, and today's date in 1968. And he successfully restored order while keeping the police away from the crowd and continued the successful peacekeeping concert in honor of slain Dr. King on this day in 1968. And on this day in 1974, Stephen King, a Maine high school teacher who had been writing on evenings and weekends, sees his first full-length novel, Carrie, published. The release by Doubleday and Company becomes a bestseller and inspires a movie of the same name. For Stephen King, Carrie kicks off a phenomenal writing career, one in which he would come to be known worldwide as the master of horror. In a chilling story that warns readers about picking on outcasts, lead character Carrie White, a high school student, discovers that she has telekinetic powers, and her classmates that torment her with bullying, and her ultra-religious and controlling mother represses the teenager. And this tension culminates in a frightening, bloody showdown at her school prom, where she, the victim of a cruel prank, uses her powers to get revenge on her peers. Carrie kicked off a non-stop, prolific streak of book publishing for Stephen King. Salem's Lot came the next year. Other King books published in the 1970s include The Shining, The Stand, and Dead Zone. The success streak continued in the 80s with Stephen King's favorites including Cujo, Christine, Pet Sematary, IT, and Misery. And many more books have followed since, for a total of more than 50 novels and novellas. Howard Hughes, one of the richest men to emerge from the American West during the 20th century, dies while flying from Acapulco to Houston on the 5th of April in 1976. He was born in Houston, and fascinated with new technology of airplanes, he invested heavily in the burgeoning West Coast aviation industry. With some training in engineering from the California Institute of Technology and the Rice Institute of Technology, he designed his own aircraft and then had his Hughes Aircraft Company build it. He became increasingly reclusive after 1950, operating through managers who rarely saw him in person. He bought up vast tracts of real estate in California, Arizona, and Nevada that skyrocketed in value. And in 1967, he became involved in the Nevada gambling industry when he purchased the famous Desert Inn Hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. Gaming authorities welcomed his involvement because it counteracted the popular image that the mafia dominated the gambling industry. And by the early 1970s, he had become the largest single landholder in Nevada. And with around 8,000 Nevada residents on his payroll, he was also the state's largest employer. Although the rumors of his bizarre behavior have been exaggerated in part due to a fraudulent memoir that he published in his final years, the billionaire became even more obsessed with privacy. He continually moved between his residences in Las Vegas, the Bahamas, Nicaragua, Canada, England, and Mexico. Other than a few male aides, almost nobody saw him, and he sometimes worked for days at a stretch in a black curtained room without sleeping. Emaciated and deranged from too little food and too many drugs, he finally became so ill that his aides decided that he needed medical treatment. He died in his airplane en route from Acapulco to Houston at the age of 70 on today's date, the 5th of April in 1976. And in 1984, on today's date, it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar who scores the 31,420th point of his career, breaking the NBA's all-time scoring record, which had been held by Wilt Chamberlain. His record remained unbroken for 38 years. Over 18,000 fans gathered at the Thomas and Mack Center, the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, to watch the Utah Jazz play Abdul-Jabbar and the Los Angeles Lakers on today's date. With less than 9 minutes left in the game, Magic Johnson passed the ball to his 7'2" teammate, and Abdul-Jabbar scored his 22nd point of the night and 31,420th point of his career. The game stopped as his teammates rushed to congratulate him, and the fans gave him an extended standing ovation. The 37-year-old was then taken out of the game after making 10 of 14 baskets from the field and 2 out of 2 from the foul line, plus 5 rebounds and 3 assists. And the Lakers went on to win the game 129 for 115. And in addition to his all-time scoring record, Abdul-Jabbar held the league record for most minutes played, 54,446, and most blocked shots, 3,189. He was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 1995. In 2023, star player LeBron James of the Los Angeles Lakers surpassed Abdul-Jabbar's record, scoring a career 38,390 points following a game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. But it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar who broke the NBA all-time scoring record on today's date in 1984. A march and rally in support of reproductive justice for women draws several hundred thousands of people to demonstrations in Washington, D.C. One of the largest protest marches in the nation's capital, the pro-choice rally, came as the U.S. Supreme Court was about to consider the constitutionality of a Pennsylvania state law that limited access to abortions. Many abortion rights advocates fear that the High Court, with its conservative majority, might endorse the Pennsylvania law or even overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling that had made abortion legal. These abortion rights advocates marched on Washington on the 5th of April in 1992. 12 years of Republican rule in the White House had weakened the abortion rights, and the Supreme Court threatened to overturn that 1973 ruling of Roe v. Wade. But a massive pro-choice rally that was held in Washington led to Democrat Bill Clinton in 1993, who inaugurated as president and within days of taking office overturned several key pieces of anti-abortion executive legislation that had been signed by his Republican predecessors Ronald Reagan and George H. Bush. And in the 90s, some extreme opponents of abortion rights turned to violent methods in their campaign to make abortion illegal again. And in 2005, more than 1 million abortion rights activists again hit the mall in Washington as part of the March for Women's Lives and protested what they saw as attempts by President George W. Bush's administration to chip away at women's reproductive rights, as well as the U.S. ban on aid to abortion clinics abroad. Abortion rights advocates marching on Washington on today's date in 1992. And in the last story that I have for you today, modern rock icon Kurt Cobain dies by suicide on today's date in 1994. His body was discovered inside his home in Seattle 3 days later by an electrician who was installing a security system in the house. And despite indications that Cobain, the leading singer of Nirvana, killed himself, some skeptics questioned the circumstances of his death and pinned responsibility on his wife, Courtney Love. His downward spiral began taking shape in Italy the previous month. He went into a coma and nearly died after mixing champagne and the drug Rohypnol, and the public was led to believe that the coma was induced by an accidental heroin overdose, since he had a well-known problem with that drug. He had convinced a friend to buy him a gun, meanwhile, claiming he needed it for protection. And on today's date, the 5th of April, he returned home. He had ingested enough Valium and heroin to reach near-fatal levels. And in the apartment above the garage was Cobain's suicide note quoting Neil Young's lyric that it is better to burn out than to fade away. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my show for today. For those of you who'd like to reach me directly, my number is 214-675-1754.